If Jimmy G makes the NFC Championship game, is he worth the first?
I will say no shot unless he actually just like balls out, and if he improves on what the 2019 season was and he's like a notch above that, then I would say yes. But do I think he will do that? No. And here's a bunch of other guys who have made a championship game in their career: Trent Dilfer, Blake Bortles, Case Keenum,
Jared Goff,
Joe Flacco. Although he was magical, and if I was a GM, I might have thrown a first round pick, seeing what he was doing, because that was crazy.
Brad Johnson,
Nick Foles. Do you remember it was the 2017 one? Who did? Like, if you looked at the quarterbacks, it was
Bortles, Keenum, Foles, and Brady.
Yeah, that was great. So we mentioned all those guys. But I guess the bottom line here is that, unless you're the main driving factor of the reason, like the Rodgers, usually like the Bradys, like those, like Josh Allen this year, Mahomes, like those type of quarterbacks, I would say, yeah, they're obviously worth the first. They're the main reason they're getting there. But if it's the Niners, you'd say, well, probably not. It's probably their defense being very dominant, their run game being incredible, them having a great O-line, good receivers, good running backs, Kyle Shanahan, great offensive minds, and you're more of just the cog in the machine. I hate saying that term, but that's more of what it's like, instead of you being, the reason your team's getting that far with just brute force, and you're just, dropping 300 yards and dropping back 50 times.
So I think that's a great point. I'm going to maybe give it a little more of a shot, but I don't think it has anything to do with the NFC Championship game. This has more to do with Jimmy G as an individual player. If Jimmy G balls out and the Niners go 8-9, he could be worth a first-round pick, because it won't be Jimmy G's fault that they went 8-9. If Jimmy G plays inconsistent football the way he played in 2019, and the Niners make it to an NFC Championship game, I wouldn't say they would make it in spite him, as some people said in 2019. They made it with him, but he didn't elevate their ceiling. That's where I would say, maybe an end of a first for Jimmy G and early second, but that's around where his value would be. I think the NFC Championship game is kind of, I understand why you're saying it, but I think that kind of goal-oriented outlook, honestly, in this particular situation just doesn't apply, because Jimmy G can throw for 35 touchdowns and 4,000 yards and be playing amazing football and making awesome decisions and making big-time throws, and the Niners might not be able to support him, and they might lose games. And that doesn't mean he isn't a quarterback that played like he is worth a first-round pick, because in that case, he definitely would be. 35 touchdowns, 4,000 yards. These are just random numbers, because like Shanahan could scheme it up. But like what I'm saying is, like, he plays outstanding football. But you could also have the situation where, again, he plays inconsistent football, but you make it really far. That's not because of the quarterback, and that's not the kind of quarterback that you want to trade a first-round pick for. So I think ultimately that's where it comes to. I don't think the NFC Championship game is going to be the end-all, be-all here with Jimmy G. I think it's going to be his individual play. And if his play is good, we'll see it. We'll know his play is good. It doesn't matter how far the Niners go, because if he plays well, I wouldn't put it on him if the Niners lose 10 games next year. Just a random if statement. But if he plays incredibly poor and the Niners are still able to make the NFC Championship game, for whatever reason, Trey Lance doesn't play and Jimmy G is inconsistent once again, where you have like the Halloween Cardinals game where he plays awesome, and then you have a game like against, say, the first game against the Buccaneers where you have 2 pick sixes, but the quarterback didn't play well at all, then that's where I think it becomes a little more complicated.
Okay, and I have a question for you, Vish. Do you think if immediately after the 2019 season a team offered a late first for Jimmy, would they take it?
So Grant says the rumor around the league is that the Patriots offered a first for Jimmy Garoppolo at that point after 2019. And yeah, I'm not breaking any news or saying anything, because he said this on his channel many times. And he said the Patriots, the Niners said no to them.
Okay. Yeah, that's that's interesting to think about, because like at the time, like when what you thought you had in Jimmy, like you just took your team to the Super Bowl, like run it back and let's do it again. But obviously injuries and stuff like that took in place. But That's an interesting, I guess, clearly I don't follow the Niners as closely as you do. But that I would not have guessed that. I would have said probably not, but
I mean, a first round pick for a starting quarterback, right? Like that makes sense. Jimmy G, that's what he is. No matter what, I think even if he plays inconsistent football, nobody's going to say he isn't a starter in the NFL, right? It's not like Teddy Bridgewater where you say, oh, maybe he's a backup, blah, blah, blah. No. Jimmy G is physically talented enough and he's good enough at the position where you say 100% he's a starter in the NFL. So like a middle to late first for a starting quarterback isn't too excessive, especially because like the Deshaun Watsons and the Josh Allens would go for like 3 or 4 first. You know what I mean? So because of that, I don't think it's excessive. But from the standpoint of if you look at him next year, I don't think the NFC Championship is the scale or the barometer where you say if he reaches that, he's going to be worth a first, because I don't think that's where his value is right now. His contract is obviously it might have to be mended a little bit because that would be his last year. But if he plays really good football, he could be worth, 2 seconds and a third or just a first, which depending on your draft positions and the value chart, both of those things could be worth the exact same.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And obviously, we are going more off the question at first, but it does come down to, his play. But I think that's interesting that he at one point was worth a first rounder because the Patriots offered a first rounder. And it's all about, we can sit back and say, is he worth the first or not? But if the Patriots offered a first for him, then clearly some people that are a lot smarter than we are thought he was worth the first. So that's interesting. Can he be worth the first again? I would say probably not, but it's not completely out of the realm of possibilities.
So I mean, what he was originally traded for at the time, the Niners were the worst team in the NFL. So a second round pick at 33, 34 is essentially
pretty much a first
round pick. Yeah, it's almost the same thing. It ended up being, I think it was 38 or 39. I want to say correctly. That's where the pick ended up being. I'm sorry. It ended up being 42 or 43. That's where the pick was. But
yeah, they were like 9 or something, 0-10, and then Jimmy
1-10, yeah.
Jimmy
they were 0-9, yeah, and then he took them from 1-10 to 6-10. But yeah, so
they beat the 2017 Jags. They beat the Jags. So, they hung like 40 on him.
Yeah, they did. Kyle Shanahan was Kyle Shanahan was unreal in that game. But the point is, I think it just comes back to like, do you think trading for a middling starter is worth a first round pick? And I think you definitely don't. Like, you don't want to trade a first-round pick
to get $28 million. Not if he's $28 million, no shot.
No, see, and on my end, if you have a valid starting quarterback like Jimmy G, and I'm the Denver Broncos or I'm the Washington football team, where my entire roster is stacked, and I just have a question mark, because even though Fitzmagic was Fitzmagic last year, he could be Fitztragic next year just because of his gunslinger mentality and his propensity to turn the football over. And then Drew Lock, even though he has special talent, more talent than Jimmy G, especially in his arm, it's just so inconsistent. And you're just not sure if he has it to be that guy in the NFL, where if I have that roster, like, if I get Jimmy G, it's not like, oh, crap, we're going to be the best team in the NFL. But you know what? If I get a valid starter like Jimmy G and I have this roster, I could win a Super Bowl. I really could. Now, it's not the most likely thing, but with my roster,
they could go to the playoffs and win a game.
Yeah, 100% you're going to the playoffs. So because of that, that's where I would say I would trade a first-round pick. If he plays good football next year, regardless of the Niners' record, I would if I'm one of those teams in that particular situation where I'm desperate.
I guess another person you could think of, like Derek Carr. I'd say he's better than Jimmy, but I'd pay a first and more for Derek Carr, probably.
I would too. I would 100%.
I'm just trying to think of someone like around Jimmy, because also with Jimmy's injury history, I would definitely not, because like obviously one game with a lot of, one season with a lot of games, but like someone around his talent level, like a Baker Mayfield after his first contract, would you trade a first for that? I'd say there's a good argument to be made there. I'd say Baker's better, but
Yeah, his talent level is complex because he is more talented, than the Teddy B's and the Goff. But I would say he's a step below the Bakers and the Tannehills and the Cousins and the Carrs in terms of physical talent. So he's kind of in a weird spot between those.
He's in the middle of the middle.
Yeah, he's kind of in a weird spot between the choose the styles of quarterback that play in the similar offenses as him and have success.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, overall, I think we're both kind of on the same page here for the
Mhm.
most part.
Yeah, definitely.